Do you have a person on your team whom you know deep in your heart is not a good fit for the company? And are you the reason the right decision isn't being made? If that sounds like you, you'll want to listen to today's podcast. I'm Beth Fahey, and welcome to Bad Boss Confessional. If leadership came with a highlight reel, this podcast would be the blooper reel. And honestly, that's where the good stuff is. After 30 plus years of managing people, I've learned that vulnerability isn't a leadership weakness, it's a leadership superpower. And this is where we practice using it. Our guest today is Brian Dosal, co-founder and CEO of Strety, an EOS software platform and a sponsor of this podcast. Welcome, Brian. I'm so glad we could make this happen.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for allowing us the opportunity to sponsor too.
Yeah, we really appreciate the support. So we want to thank you so much for your support of what we're doing here. And that extends to your willingness to share your own bad boss moment. So I was wondering, to create a little context, would you mind sharing a brief rundown of your history as a boss up until this point?
Sure. So thanks again for having me. I was flattered that I get to talk about all my mistakes. And I'm actually, it's funny because I feel good that you only asked for one. So I feel better about that. I was 27 years old, working actually for a family business, not a boss at all. And I naively thought I could start my own company. I had software background from college. I had a lot of energy and again, a lot of naivete for, hey, how this is not going to be that much work or I can do this, right? I saw my father do it. I saw other people do it. So without much training or expertise, I hired some folks and started up a company called Bright Gauge, which is where actually that main mistake that we'll talk about came from. And that was like probably, 15 years ago now. And so I've been managing people ever since. I grew that company very fortunately from two of us to 35 when I sold successfully to a private equity backed company. I took a couple of years off and then started Strety with some old friends of mine from that previous company. I've since 27 years old, been in a leadership position with absolutely zero training. So this podcast is perfect.
Well, I mean, we find this all the time in entrepreneurial companies, right? Is somebody has an idea, you see a gap in the marketplace, you build a product or service, starts taking off, and you're like, management, schmanagement, I don't need to learn this stuff. I'm great with people. That's how I built this business.
And you introduce so many variables as an entrepreneur because you really you rely on anyone that's willing to help. So it could be friends, could be family. And then that creates unique dynamics as the business matures and gets older. So yeah, the management mistakes are high for us. But fortunately, I'm here to, I've lived through it and successfully gotten past it. So anything I can share for someone else that's in my stage, I'll be happy to do.
Yeah, so I have to say, I'm picking up on a theme already. Sounds like there's something around friends, maybe, and
Oh yeah.
working with people,
Yes, but the good news is we have one of my best friends is still my business partner today. So like I've had the success part of it is great. But since you forced me to find those mistakes, I had to go back and I was like, oh yes, that one person I had to let go that was really hard and that was all me. That was a big one we could talk about. But yeah, the dynamics are real in entrepreneurials. You start with nothing. You just got to grow. And then you end up with, oh, this is working now. And it's like all those decisions you made without even thinking about them. Now you have to live with them. So it's unique.
Yeah. So do you mind giving us a deep dive on that story? Because I think this will resonate with tons of our listeners. I know it would with a lot of my clients for sure.
Yeah. So the one I think is worth talking about was, again, the context is the entrepreneurial journey from, I think we had 4 employees or 5, had just started this analytics software company. That was the base product. And we sold to small businesses around the world. It was all internet based, but it was an analytics product. So it was very technical in nature. And as we started growing, I was doing all the support, right? My brother was actually, at that point, he had joined and he was heading up sales and marketing. My college roommate, his best friend was looking for work and he had a former sales background. So it's like, all right, Larry, you're in too, man. I'm like, whatever I could pay you. So we had a small team. And again, those people worked out, fortunately. So it's not about them. But we needed someone badly as soon as we started growing in support. And it was a very technical role. I was doing it. And it's one of those EOS things before I even knew about EOS where you have to just let go of the vine and let someone else do that work. And we brought someone on. And when you're five, six employees and growing fast, like you need people that wear every hat, that can work an ungodly amount of hours, that can take very little pay, especially at that time from an entrepreneurial, from a self-funded company as we were. And so we found a couple of good people, but we hired this one individual who was an awesome fit. And, there were small red flags here and there, but we all have them, right? Like we were all just working hard and like nothing that we talked about back then. It was not even that we looked back and say, oh yeah, that was the moment. He was great. But what had happened was over time, we grew and we grew and it took about 3 years and we still had that core team together, but we realized like this person was not fitting. And I say this with such clarity now. I was confused as heck in the moment. So we realized that this person just wasn't fitting this new stage of the company. I couldn't wrap my head around why wouldn't this be, or what's the friction? It wasn't me, was the product, was it the other team members? And he was still adding value, but it was just a friction point. This is actually not to tie it back to EOS too much, but for your clients and those that are EOS forward listening, it's actually around the same time I found, EOS and Red Tractions 2016. And you read the people analyzer and the right person, right seed. And we dove into that in quarterly meetings and he just wouldn't fit the culture. As soon as we got our values lined up, he wouldn't fit that. And then we kind of disagreed on did he get the new job, and because of the GWC, and forgive us for the people that don't know EOS listening. So anyway, so we struggled and struggled, and he was, again, still adding value, but creating friction, even from a culture perspective, even though he was a core person of that team originally. And it wasn't until we hired, we were really doing well, profitable, and we were able to attract great talent. And we hired these two just superstars from different parts of the country. They moved to South Florida where we were, young folks. And this one woman who started working with him came to me maybe 6 months later. So after she already built her own credibility, and she said, Brian, I just can't work with this guy. And she was the nicest person, the most patient, and I just couldn't, it just hit me hard. And I was like, oh my God, the rest of the team that's been telling me about this individual not being the right fit at the moment were right. And so, yeah, so that was the peak moment of realizing that I had made a mistake, that I was doing a disservice to my own company by keeping this person around because I had such loyalty to him, because I had such love to him. He was a friend of mine, that I had to make a decision and kind of part ways with him at that moment, as tough as that was. So anyway, I'll pause there and let you follow up with some questions where you want to take that. But that was the storyline.
There's so much gold here because this is such a common issue. And I'm really glad you brought it forward on the podcast here today because I don't think it's been directly addressed. So I took some notes while you were talking, and there's just so many common things. One of them is ignoring, you said, small red flags. And I'm curious, like, what were the red flags that were just kind of like,
Yeah, great question. Great question, because people listening that know me will know all these stories. So again, small company, support, technical product. We had to, the phrase act as if a lot of times, right? Like, hey, this is the product, this is how it works, this is the technical reason why this data doesn't look the exact way you think, this is the systems we're pulling data from, that's what your data's messed up over there. Like, we had to provide a lot of technical support, and a lot of times we didn't have all the answers. And this particular, and when you're small and growing fast and you're just trying to get support that gets done and work through it, you may say things too quickly, or you may answer stuff without knowing exactly if that's right. Not lying. I haven't said the word lying. What this person would end up doing is really being overconfident of what he knew. And we always thought that was a red flag, but a lot of times he was correct, but sometimes he was not. And there was no humility and like, oh no, I messed that one up. Let me go back. And we saw that a few times, a few hints of that. And that was not our style. Like, humble is actually one of our core values that we still have in this new company. And so those red flags were always like, hey man, like that is not being humble. Like, to not know that you made a mistake or you were incorrect in how you phrase that to the customer. And I was like, it's just, but we got to work fast here. The confidence worked a lot of times, but sometimes if it's overly confident, it's not a good thing. Those are the early on red flags.
Yeah. And another thing that you hit on as you were telling that story was this concept that sometimes the seat outgrows the person.
Absolutely.
And I see this a lot in fast moving companies because, I mean, you're building the plane as you're flying it. And whatever the definition of the seat was a year ago, now everybody's leveled up. And we're continually getting more strategic as the company grows. The definition of what people are accountable in their seats also increases, and it's a lot more people focused in nature typically, or strategy focused. And sometimes people just can't hang.
Yeah, and I think the seats change, right? And you said it there, that seats, the responsibilities grow, yes, but like sometimes the seats just aren't there with the ones that were there the first 3 years. And for us,
Right.
that was the seat was different now, and that person no longer fit that seat. But it's hard, as you alluded to, like it's hard because hey, they were there from the beginning, and everyone else in that core group is growing and is now in the leadership team, right? Like everyone else moved with us. And then if it's just one person, especially if you haven't heard a story like this before, like I hadn't, you really don't know, is it me? Is it the job description or the seat that's wrong? Sometimes it's just the right person, but wrong seat. And there's not a seat for that person in that company anymore. That's a tough thing to swallow.
It is. And I think when people start to realize that is another EOS concept, I share these all the time on the podcast. It's this concept of hitting the ceiling, right? And it's totally natural for a company to advance, to grow, and then they hit a ceiling. And it's usually people or process, and they figure it out. They break through the ceiling, they keep going on their trajectory. But sometimes the company gets stuck. In fact, oftentimes the company gets stuck. And it's really the deconstruction of what's actually going on here. What's the root cause of the issue that we can't grow as an organization that causes you to look at your accountability chart, to assess capacity, to assess all of that stuff so that you can really have the right structure moving forward. And so often out of loyalty, I find that people just they make up a seat for a person just because they don't want to have the tough conversation.
I think this is all around the same time that we found EOS. Like I think we subconsciously, I needed the language which EOS gave me to say, hey, this person isn't right fit. I couldn't put it together until I did the core values, and we did the core values analysis until we exactly said what do we need out of that seat, and then it became so clear, which is why I'm a huge fanboy of EOS. I mean, now I have a company just supports it, but it really just gave me the language and the clarity and then calmness to say, hey, this is the right decision for the organization, which is ultimately the seat I'm responsible for, right? And that helped because even to this day, I still feel bad that I had to let him go. Like he was a good buddy, and when we cashed out a couple of years later and sold, like everyone got a lot of money from that. Everyone that was with us, especially longtime employees, and he missed out on that. And
Mm.
man, I've gone back and with Larry, my business partner, saying, "Should we just send him a check? Like he was so valuable, like it's that." So it still pains me to this day about it because of that. But I've learned my lesson, especially in this new company, that just having that clarity in this EOS structure obviously helps so much, and sticking with that and being as unemotional as you can be is the best thing. And I think everyone appreciates that. Certainly, people around appreciate that clarity.
Yeah. And so there was another thing that you talked about in your story that also resonated with me, which this concept of when the wrong people stay, the right people leave.
Yes.
We don't realize that, first of all, as bosses, I think we lose our credibility when we keep people around that are not a fit for the organization, especially with rock stars. And rock stars are the people that are, first of all, if they're not challenged, they're going to leave. And if they see that you're not addressing the people issues on their team that are impacting them, they're going to leave.
Yeah. 100%. Fortunately, I had enough insight or humility at that moment to know that, to just instinctively know, like, if we're not making sure our rock stars are awesome, especially someone coming in from the outside. When people grow with other people, they kind of tolerate. Everyone kind of gets tolerant of poor performers, but you get an outside person who's the right person, right seat, right culture, and then they can provide that outside lens real fast. I think that's massive. I mean, I've seen this with other companies that I'm a part of that I've helped out with, where the good people leave when the bad people stay. It's and certainly from a poor culture perspective. But for us too, what made it hard, and again, for anyone listening that has any similar story, like culture was great. Like he was part of it. Like it was the fabric was there. It was such a small thing, or a small thing at the time, but it would have been bigger and bigger. And it was. It started. Luckily, we didn't lose anyone. Like I didn't go that far down the path, but I was getting there. Such a huge lesson learned. I think I was again, 32, 30. I feel so much wiser even at my age now, just because of that experience.
I'd love to talk a little bit more about this, about the hiring people that are heavy hitters, because this is also something I see quite a bit is we can't afford it. We don't know what we're really hiring for, not sure what that pay would be. Can you talk a little bit about your rapid growth and how you transitioned into knowing that you needed to hire people that knew more than you?
Um, I read a book. I think it was the People book that Mark O'Donnell wrote with Kelly, and he said the warm body syndrome, where you just hire the next warmest body that you can find during fast growth. That was us. I mean, we were finding friends and cousins of cousins, right? It was just like whoever could come in to help. We've always been self-funded too, so we've always had to be very careful with our pennies, even including at Strety. We're self-funded. We do that purposely so that we don't overhire. We can be very, I think restriction is good for building a good company. So we had to be cognizant of that. Like, hey, we can't spend so much money on the perfect person, but we still need, super smart, well-rounded folks. The biggest thing for us is that at some point we realized that we can find those people. The jobs that we're looking for, weren't, we're not building the next AI model. So as long as we met a lower band of that salary range for those rock stars, that we had to spend the time finding those rock stars and not just looking for the next warm body. That was later on, like that was 5 years into the journey. Because again, we needed anyone to help during that fast growth period. At Strety now, like every hire, like we take our time. If we know we need to hire someone 6 months from now, like we take our time. That's the biggest thing too. I should have said at the start, but just, having the bullpen or having that, the bench of people that you could recruit from is huge. So you don't have to rush into a hire when you're growing fast. I think that's where we made a lot of mistakes, was rushing too fast. So paying the lowest, amount that you can for that range of that rock star, still going after them, taking your time, finding a culture fit like that. That's, another key part that you always have to do. So that was our strategy, and that's our strategy going forward now at Strety as well.
And I think that's a really good advice. And I've seen this play out well with my clients is, when you paint a picture of opportunity for somebody who may be just ready to move up to the next level, that's the sweet spot, it seems to be, in an entrepreneurial organization. Because if you find that person who might be a mid-level manager, but they're showing all kinds of signs of being possibly a functional director for a seat, and everything else checks the boxes, like they're a go-getter, hungry, humble, smart, all the things, that's when you can really do well with your hiring. But those people are not plentiful, right?
No, and they're usually employed as well. They're usually highly employed and valued by their previous employer. So yes,
Yeah.
it's not an easy situation, but you're right about finding the rock stars to be, right? Like the ones that are just growing into it. That was also a strategy, but that led to its own issues, because then we hired a lot of first time managers. If that makes sense. Like we hired a lot of rock stars that wanted to be management, but then their first time. And that was my first time company. And I like that created its own problems, which thank goodness we found EOS, because I read the traction. I was like, here you go, everyone. This is how we're running the company now. And that helped all those future rock stars, now rock stars, become better managers to start. Because the other thing too, and sorry if I'm going on a tangent here, you can always hit that tangent button. My job itself was also growing the company. I was not a trained manager that I was there coaching people. Like I believe in the concept of managers of one, which is, yes, you're a direct report, but you self-manage as much as you can, because we're all cranking here and we're not hiring middle layers of management. Like I'm not a believer in that.
Mhm.
It's not my style. So hiring those folks and not giving them coaching, my own coaching ability, because I'm there cranking alongside them, made it difficult for everyone. But if you find the right people with the right values, I think they all work through it together. From my experience in that company, selling it, everyone's gone on, or at least the core majority have gone on to do amazing things at bigger companies. So I feel like they did get the right training, but at the time it was a little bit chaotic for those first time managers.
Yeah. So I'd love to learn more about the current company that you're building. And just if you could talk a little bit about Strety and what you do.
Yeah, no problem. Again, we ran into EOS in 2016 with the previous company. We ended up selling that company in 2019. And the acquirers, I left the next day. They couldn't believe the CEO would leave the next day and everything would work fine. They thought I was like, I was pulling a fast one on them almost. And I was like, no, the business runs great. Like, just follow the model. You don't need me. And I was so grateful to the EOS model. And we had actually built a little version of Strety at this previous company to run it ourselves. So you can kind of see where the story's going. But a couple years after, a few years off, my business partner Larry, who was our former sales guy, said, "Hey Brian, this EOS market is as big as we had dreamed it to be. I never thought it would actually get as popular as it is now." And so a couple years ago, he said, "Let's try to build out that software that we had it for ourselves. Let's build it for the market. There's not a lot of softwares in the market, software platforms." And so off we set. Which Strety, which the name means nothing, by the way, for anyone listening that actually uses Strety, it was actually a code name for the product internally. That also will haunt me. I'll talk about that in a future podcast one day. So we passionately build software for companies running on EOS. And we have a unique perspective that if you're running on EOS, that is the core part of how you run your business. And I'm customer number one, so this is all my opinion. And so we built a platform that runs EOS as pure as we can be, but then you can do other things too, like project management, surveys, employee engagement, performance reviews, stuff that I was always missing. So we had all these different systems, and I was like, God, EOS is the core, but I wish I could do more with one system so I don't have to log into 85 different software platforms. That's Strety as it is today. Again, self-funded. I'm not paying myself anything. We're growing like crazy. People are loving it, and it's just like I don't want to say passion project to minimize it, but it is truly a job we all love, and it's a product we're all passionate about building.
Yeah, well, I know several of my clients have migrated over to Strety, or new clients I'm just directing them there at this point because, I mean, it is a good product and anything that makes it easier. So I implemented EOS in 2014 and I used Google Sheets, which, Google Docs, Google Sheets.
So did we, right? Like that's what everyone was doing.
Yeah, it was a nightmare for me because I sat in the visionary seat and the integrator seat and just managing where the papers were and printing out level 10 agendas before meetings and things like that. It can be done. I mean, it's not rocket science. It just requires, a higher level of follow through, skill set than I think most entrepreneurs have or want to deal with. And so make it easier.
Yeah, I still tell people about, people ask me what I do, kids, parents at school, and I say, "Oh, do you know traction?" And one of the three will say yes, and then the other two will say, "What's that?" And explain it to them, and their minds are blown. Like, "Oh, wow! Like, there's a model to how to run a company," and like that excites me. I love that there's still a lot of people out there that still haven't heard of traction and can still benefit from it. So to me, it's like, hey, we're just a platform that runs it. We think we're better than the other ones. We think the other ones were built not by software folks, and we're the software folks that want to build it. So we have a unique perspective, but it's buying in on like, hey, I can run my business better, more calmly. Calm is my favorite word, and EOS did that. So the software is the fun part, but it's like getting people bought in and saying, yes, it's easier to run my business on EOS, and then it's easier to run my business on EOS on Strety, right? Like that's what we get a kick out of.
That's great. I love it. We'll return to my conversation with Brian after a word from our sponsors. Do you love running on EOS? Try Strety, the EOS platform people love. Native integrations and extra features help you manage people, projects, process, and engagement. Connected to your favorite EOS tools and all in one place. You love EOS. It's time to love the platform you're running it on. Try Strety free at strety.com. That's STRETY.com. Strety, the EOS platform people love. Let's be honest, hiring the right people is hard. That's why I love Titus Talent Strategies. Their whole person hiring approach helps you find and keep A players who align with your values, and they back it with an industry-leading guarantee. Best part? Titus Talent Strategies is included in the entrepreneurial toolkit for companies running on EOS. Check them out at titustalent.com/EOS. And now back to my conversation with Brian. Okay, Brian. So I ask all of my guests this question on the podcast, and it sounds like you've solved or identified the issue about identifying when maybe you've crossed a line between being friendly and a friend, especially with your direct reports. Would you say that's totally solved, or does it creep up again every once in a while?
I think I don't think I'd ever be fully solved because I do enjoy who I work with quite a bit. And we do, there's a lot of camaraderie, but I do check myself and make sure I'm always being honest for the organization. So I don't want to say it's solved. Actually, that wouldn't fit my own core value of being humble at all. So it's a work in progress, but I feel like I'm doing it much better, and the team seems to be responding that way as well. I've had another recent issue about it too, so I'm getting there.
All right. So if you were to get a tattoo on your body somewhere that reminded you to stay focused and be mindful of that, what would the tattoo be and where would it be located?
That's a hilarious question. I think I would do arm. I don't know what language I'd put it in because I think it'd be cooler if it was in some sort of ancient language. Um, I would say be honest, not kind. I
Mm.
think people respond to honesty, and I think people get tripped up being too kind and tiptoeing around the tulips, if you will. And so I have to remind myself all the time, and someone else, one of my great buddies that's helping us out now, working for us now. So transitioning used to be working with us, employee, buddy, we sell, we're buddies, we've gone trips together. Now he's direct report again. And he's the one that reminded me, he says, just be honest with me. It's like, whatever you say, it's okay. If it's bad, good, whatever, just be honest. And I was like, you're right.
Hmm.
That's a tattoo right there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always quoting Brene Brown: to be clear is kind, to be unclear is unkind.
Yeah. That's a better one.
Well, I mean, you don't have to put Brene Brown on your arm, but it's kind of a long one. But it really brings up the point about being nice. That's not really an attribute in business, because that basically means that you're not being truthful, and you're preventing somebody from growing often when you don't do that. So if you really care about them, you're going to be honest because you want to see them grow, right?
Yeah. I always grew up and I had my father was an entrepreneur and he always wanted us to be part of the business. And so we always had this concept of family business. And so and I'm sure nowadays it's pretty popular. It's like, it took me a while through that previous company. It's like, hey, we're not a family business. Like we're more of a team, a bit like a sports team. And it doesn't mean we can't have a loving, supportive culture. And that took me a while to put together. And so now I use the team concept, like, hey, the Patriots when Brady was there, like everyone get along, or the Miami Heat is a strong culture. That doesn't mean they keep the wrong player. And that was big for me. So transitioning from saying, hey, we're a family business to, hey, we're a strong team and we care about each other, but everyone's got to be the right player, the right person, the right seat.
My buddy Renee Bauer always talks about this. If businesses ran themselves like the NFL, we wouldn't have a lot of the issues that we have in business.
Yeah. And I would even say to my team, I'd be like, I can't get rid of, well, my brother's a bad example because we do work together. But like if you hire a cousin, you can't separate them from family, right? They're always family. And so like that, it's too hard to create that in the business world. You have to be able to, transition players in and out like the NFL and like the basketball team. So that was a big one. So if someone hasn't heard that one, take that one to heart because it doesn't mean I'm a huge culture guy. It doesn't mean you can't have the best culture where people love working together because the teams do it. And that's when you thrive, right? When you have that right culture. But part of that, as your job as a CEO or as a founder, whatever, is to be able to keep that culture created. And a lot of that's being clear and honest and keeping the right players. So
Awesome. Well, it's been such a pleasure getting to know you a little bit better today, Brian. And I really appreciate, again, the support on the podcast. We love telling people about Strety, and I wish you all the success and luck. Are you going to be at the EOS conference this year?
yep. Yeah, we'll be the title sponsor or one of the main title sponsors. So, but no, Beth, thank you. Like, as I said, when you first reached out, like your passion comes out of you. And I love that from the first time we met. So anything I can do to support Beth and EOS worldwide, I'm a big fan of. So thanks for doing this. I know it's a lot of work.
Great. Well, thanks again. And we'll see you again soon, and hopefully before April.
Yes.
Many thanks to Brian Dosal for sharing his all too familiar story about letting loyalty get in the way of making people decisions. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and share with friends who need to hear this. Thanks for listening to Bad Boss Confessional.